Preface: Danger and Opportunity. The world is in a crisis now. As its empire declines toward collapse, the United States leadership is making a series of disastrous errors. The neocons in Washington, D.C. are determined to maintain U.S. global domination regardless of what it might take. The stakes are high for them. They seem to believe that if they allow any other country to challenge their global leadership, their whole system could fall apart. They consider it crucial to control global trade, especially the trade in energy. So they're prepared to do whatever it takes, supporting genocide in Israel by providing weapons, money, and a bizarre moral justification for horrific genocidal bombing is a sign of what it takes. Blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline was another sign of what it can take. That was a desperate last-ditch measure after efforts to persuade their strongest European ally to cut off Russian energy supplies didn't work. Europeans are now paying much higher prices for natural gas and oil than they did before. The result has been a drastic change in living standards for ordinary people in Europe and major economic problems across the entire world. Western European leaders have been rounded up and bludgeoned into a unified NATO alliance against Russia and in support of Israeli genocide against Palestinians. This alliance, originally composed of North Atlantic countries under U.S. leadership at the end of World War II, is now also being extended to Asia. It's a quest to curb China's historic economic success, which threatens Western domination of global trade. Now most countries around the world have stronger trade relations with China than with the U.S. or its European allies. The BRICS coalition, composed of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, and now also Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates, has in recent years actually surpassed the group of 7 rich countries in gross domestic product. Many more countries want to join BRICS. It offers them an alternative to Western domination. The leaders of the G7 countries, the USA, UK, Germany, France, Italy, Japan, and Canada, met in Hiroshima, Japan in May 2023 to forge a stronger alliance and denounce Russian threats of nuclear aggression. U.S. President Biden did not use the occasion to apologize to Japan for the first and only nuclear attacks the world has ever experienced by the U.S. on Hiroshima and Nagasaki at the end of World War II. These new super bombs killed hundreds of thousands of people and permanently injured many more. Historians have made convincing arguments that the true purpose of these nuclear attacks was to warn the Soviet Union that it could be next. But the Soviets were able to develop their own nuclear potential. Ever since that time, the people of the world have lived with a balance of terror, never knowing if one or another of the superpowers would start a global conflagration. It could be considered ironic, if not obscene, for the United States and its G7 allies to use Hiroshima as the place to denounce Russian nuclear threats. But projection and big lies have been a key part of official justifications for war many times. Weapons of mass destruction was the rallying cry to invade Iraq at the start of the current century. The real reason for the U.S. invasion was determination to control Iraq's oil resources. At the start of the U.S. war in Vietnam in 1964, there was the Gulf of Tonkin incident in which a North Vietnamese patrol boat was accused of attacking a U.S. Navy ship. It led to the nightmare of war in Vietnam that killed millions of Vietnamese and tens of thousands of young Americans. But the Vietnamese won. The fact that U.S. Navy ships now surround China and patrol the Taiwan Strait can be seen as continuation of a pattern. The U.S. fosters and fortifies elements inside a country it wants to dominate, then positions its military dangerously close to its chosen enemy. It then accuses the chosen enemy of aggression. That has been the pattern in the build-up to the current conflict with Russia, starting long before February 2022. In 2004, a color revolution in Ukraine toppled a government friendly to Russia. It was an American creation, a sophisticated and brilliantly conceived exercise in Western branding and mass marketing, according to Ian Traynor of The Guardian, back in 25 November 2004. It included U.S. consultancies, pollsters, diplomats, the two big American parties, and U.S. non-government organizations. End quote. The same pattern was used in Serbia, Georgia, and Belarus, all allies of Russia. In December 2013, U.S. Assistant Secretary of State Victoria Nuland told the U.S.-Ukraine Foundation that the U.S. had spent about $5 billion in democracy-building programs in Ukraine since 1991. The results of the 2004 color revolution were reversed in 2010, which set the stage for the Maidan events of 2013 and early 2014. Meanwhile, the U.S. and NATO built up forces in the region. In summer 2021, 30,000 U.S. troops led Operation Defender Europe 2021, a set of NATO exercises from the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea. In December, the U.S. staged simulation bombing raids within 12 miles of Russian airspace. NATO warplanes confronted Russian aircraft 290 times in 2021. The U.S. strategy of using Ukraine to attack Russia has existed for a long time. Former National Security Advisor Zbigniew Brzezinski summed it up in his 1997 book, The Grand Chessboard. Ukraine is, he said, a new and important space on the Eurasian chessboard because its very existence as an independent country means Russia ceases to be a Eurasian empire, unquote. He proposed a loosely confederated Russia composed of a European Russia, a Siberian Republic, and a Far Eastern Republic. He wrote that, quote, what happens with the distribution of power on the Eurasian landmass will be of decisive importance to America's global primacy, end quote. He added that a sovereign Ukraine is a critically important component of such a policy. The Eurasian landmass includes both China and Russia, of course. That helps to explain why U.S. leaders tend to link the two countries in their war plans. In 2013, after the democratically elected leaders of Ukraine decided not to redirect the country's economy away from Russia and toward Western Europe, the United States helped foment a coup d'etat. It encouraged far-right forces to take over the government and launch an anti-Russian crusade. The Russian language, spoken by about a third of the country's people, was outlawed. The people of the Donbass, where Russian speakers are the majority, resisted, demanding autonomy and forging independent people's republics. The people of Crimea broke away from Ukraine, rejoining Russia. A civil war ensued, with fascist-led Ukrainian forces terrorizing the Donbass regions, causing an estimated 14,000 deaths. In 2021, NATO war games and simulated bombing attacks took place along the Russian border from the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea. In the 7 years prior to Russia's intervention, NATO trainers helped reshape the Ukrainian military. In December 2021, the Russian government proposed a peace plan based on the Minsk II Accords: autonomy for the Donbass regions, separation of Crimea, strict neutrality for Ukraine outside NATO. The U.S. leaders called the proposal a non-starter. A month after the Russian special military operation began, the governments of Ukraine and Russia agreed in principle to a peace deal, mediated by Turkey, their Black Sea neighbor. That deal was nixed by the U.S. and U.K. leaders. The U.S. managed to snatch war from the jaws of peace. The evidence to prove all this can be found in the chapters of this book. It shows that the conflict in Ukraine didn't have to happen, that China is not an enemy of the U.S., and that the Palestinian people have a right to stop Israeli apartheid. A new peace movement is emerging. It faces enormous obstacles, including a gigantic wave of war hysteria engineered in Washington, magnified exponentially by a captive mainstream media that seems to have abandoned all pretense of critical journalistic independence and objectivity. But as facts emerge and truth surfaces, the movement for peace will intensify. Combined with the horrific results of sanctions and war, these facts and truths can be expected to bring ever greater waves of opposition and resistance into the fray. Whether efforts to achieve peace can overwhelm the power of the U.S. and NATO war machine is an open question. The alternative is too horrific to imagine. That in itself can be a driving force to build the peace movement we need. And we can be confident that the neocons have made a bad gamble. They are unlikely to win. Their loss could bring about a world free of imperialist war. It's early to know if that can happen, but it's a possibility worth striving for. The Chinese word for crisis is composed of two characters, one meaning danger, the other meaning opportunity.